Hello, my name is Douglas Bloch. I'm an author and depression survivor. Welcome to your Depression Recovery channel, where each week we talk about practical tools and coping strategies for healing from depression and anxiety. The topic of this video is, can world events make you depressed? For many years I've noticed that much of the news we see on the television and the media is actually bad news. Each night we're bombarded by images of terrorism, terrorist attacks, war, violence, natural disasters. And I've noticed when I let myself get exposed too much to this, my mood takes a dip. And it's also true with my clients. Well, recently the situation has gotten worse because we just had it in the United States, the 2016 presidential election. And as a result, many of my clients report to me that their fears about the future, their anxiety in general, has gone up, and their depression has also. In fact, one good friend of mine took the results so hard that he slipped into a major depression. So the question becomes, how can we, as depressed people who are very sensitive and vulnerable, take care of ourselves when we're constantly exposed to this negativity on the media and all this bad news? To answer this question, I consulted my friend Noah, who helped me start this channel. He has a channel of his own. And together, one rainy afternoon in Portland, Oregon, we sat down and had a conversation about this topic, and that's what you're going to see now. I hope you find it enlightening.
So today I want to talk about world events and how they can affect people, mind, body, and soul, and more specifically mental health. I guess the question I want to ask, and I feel like a lot of people could benefit from hearing your perspective on, is can world events make you depressed? And if so, what do you do to deal with that?
Well, it's interesting we bring that up today because before I came here, I was on the phone long distance coaching somebody on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Who, after the American election, we're doing this in, March of 2017.
Right.
So after the election 5 months ago, in November, where we picked a new president,
right.
This person just completely tanked and went into a deep depression, and it actually triggered an episode. And he had never really had a depressive episode before.
Wow.
And now he's struggling to come out of it. He's doing a little bit better, but according to him, the major factor of his getting into this depression was the election, the despair he felt about the future of the United States, what's going to happen to him, some of his friends who are refugees, etc., etc. So there's a perfect example of someone who was affected by a particular event, e.g. the election in the United States. And the little poll I take of the people I know, one of my former group members called me up about a week later and said, I've gone into a dip. What can you do to help me? So there's just one example.
Yeah, and it's something I've heard as well. And I think some people are so sensitive. And I don't mean that in a negative connotation. I just mean where some people are just sensitive souls that when major events happen, be it a major election where someone they're concerned about has been elected, or a natural disaster, or whatever, whether it be globally or locally, they take it so personal and they can't let it go, and they obsess over it, and they can't find a way to work past it. I mean, what are you supposed to do when that happens? Because I personally have felt some pretty obsessive, depressive feelings in general over things in the past, such as social inequities and inequalities and what do you call it? Institutionalized racism. When I was in a social studies class, I learned about this, and I just felt overwhelmed by a problem that I was like, I don't know how to fix, and I felt like I needed to do something. I didn't know what to do, and I crumbled. I literally just threw myself into despair and anxiety, and I felt overwhelmed by it, and I didn't really know what to do. And I mean, what are you supposed to do with these things? How do you take this information in stride, but not let it consume you and be debilitating?
One of the things I tell my clients, and it's been written about by a guy named Andrew Weil, a very famous medical doctor who wrote Spontaneous Healing. He was really famous in the 90s. Very smart guy. He talked about limiting your exposure to the news, and I'll tell you why. Because when you turn on the TV at night, what do you mostly see? Terrorist attacks.
Exactly.
You see natural disasters. You see, like we have in Portland, we have something called KGW8.
Yeah.
I love their weather forecaster, Matt Zaffino, so I turn on the 11 o'clock news. But before I can get to him, someone was murdered in Vancouver. Someone got stabbed. Someone got robbed, and so the news is skewed towards the bad news.
Of course. I mean, I think everyone can attest that a lot of it is just depressing. It's fear-based media.
Yeah, but that's because, they believe, the papers and the radio stations believe that's what sells.
Sure.
So a friend of mine once said it's like a nervous system that only lets in the pain and not the pleasure. Think about the media as a nervous system going around the world and, connecting everyone to everything. What did Marshall McLuhan called the global village?
Yeah.
But here's this nervous system only letting in the pain, not the pleasure. So when you look at the news, you get exposed to the negative. Now, this is really dangerous for people with depression because they tend to be negative anyway.
Right.
They tend to see the glass as half, empty as opposed to half full. They tend to look through the glass darkly. So, they're predisposed to worrying and being pessimistic and feeling hopeless. So all this does is reinforce it like tenfold.
Right.
So it's that so that's one reason why you got to basically just be discriminating.
And how do you do that? How do you set boundaries or minimize unrealistic amounts of information regarding good and bad in the world? I mean, what's a tool? What's an option there?
I get the New York Times. I just glance at the headlines and get a sense of what's going on. But if something is really too bad or too painful, I don't read it, the article in detail, because it's just going to get to me.
So you recognize that it could be upsetting and triggering, and you move on. You set that boundary with yourself.
Here's another thing that I want your viewers to know. The timing of when you get exposed to the news, world events, is particularly important. Right before you wake up, as you're waking up, and right before you go to sleep, you're in something called a hypnagogic state. It's sort of an in-between space between waking and sleeping, between consciousness and unconsciousness.
Okay.
At that point, your subconscious mind is especially, open to suggestion. So here's an example I learned in a seminar. Actually, one of the people in a seminar I gave a long time ago told me a story. So he had a daughter about 8 years old, and he got her for her birthday a radio alarm clock.
Okay.
To wake up in the morning, and go get ready to go to school.
Sure.
And as soon as that happened, within the next couple of weeks, the teachers noticed that her behavior had changed. She was acting out. She was pushing people. She was acting aggressively.
So when she was in that hypnagogic state, when she was in that, when the radio turned on.
Yeah, what happens? The radio turned on to basically. She was turned on to like NPR.
Sure.
And the first thing that she was hearing was some disaster, some murder, some calamity, some disaster. And that was seeping into her subconscious.
Wow.
And
so this is really powerful. So you're saying that what you take into your system early on and late can be very influential and suggestive to how you can feel, how you can process from the day and going forward.
So what happened was, when they found this out, they changed the station to classical music. So now she's woken up to Mozart, to Bach, And
super untalented people. Keep going.
Yeah, yes. Especially Baroque music, but all sorts of music, but it's classical. And all the symptoms went away.
Wow.
So the power of, what happens when you, okay, so I have this video on my channel, guys. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. It's called Begin and End the Day on a Positive Note.
All right. We'll put a link in the description for it.
Yeah, so what I suggest to people is, when you get up, you are so vulnerable to, you've heard of getting up on the wrong side of bed, right?
Of course.
So you're so vulnerable at that point, you want to consciously make sure that you sit down, say a positive affirmation, listen to some inspiring music, get your day off on the right foot by exposing yourself to something positive and something uplifting. Now, in the same way, right before you go to bed at night, you should, start to have a routine to get to bed, sit down, read something cool, again, listen to some nice music. Now, that's why one of my minister friends says, don't watch the 11 o'clock news. If the last thing you hear or see before going to bed is a bunch of bummers, it's going to affect your sleep.
It's going to affect your sleep.
And you're going to wake up in a bad mood or, feeling depressed. So
set boundaries.
The timing, you set boundaries and watch particularly what you expose yourself early in the morning or late in the evening. Remember I said how the media basically shows us what's wrong instead of what's right?
Right.
So in January 21st, 2017, one of my favorite writers for the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof, writes this article, says, 2017 might be the best year ever. And people saying, what? How could that be? We just had this election, things are going downhill. And he starts quoting statistics about how, 250,000 or children or less children in poverty than a year ago, or millions have been saved by vaccinations that weren't available before. So on and on he lists all the good things that are happening in the world.
That we don't hear
all
about.
All the advances that we don't hear about.
We don't hear about, right.
I mean, Bill and Melinda Gates have this huge foundation. The guy who used to run Microsoft, that's helping to cure malaria in Africa.
Wow.
So it's all what we put our attention on.
Of course. And to that note, if I might interject really quick, that whole miscued information or being, taking in a lot of info that's inherently more negative than positive led me to an app called the Good News Network. I don't know if you're the one that suggested it to me.
Yeah.
You are. So I downloaded this app because I believe you suggested it to me, and all the app does, guys, all this app does is update you on good news going around the world, going on around the world exclusively. So, things like Doug just mentioned, or even smaller stuff like woman saves a puppy who was drowning. It doesn't really matter, but the point is all day long, and I keep my notifications on. I just bling, something goes off, and I read something wonderful that's going on in the world. And when you get on Facebook and so many social media, it is just inundated with negative things. This brings me to another potential suggestion. Unfollow people that are consistently posting negative, dark things. That's something within your control. You don't have to unfriend them, but you can unfollow them so that you don't have to necessarily take in their negativity. That's a very good suggestion. Yeah, so I do that. I follow the Good News Networks, and those are a couple of ways that I can just very casually buffer all the bad things that are going on while not losing perspective on the good things.
Just as you were talking about the Good News Network, I started to feel uplifted. I mean, I'm so sensitive.
Me too.
Even one good story, I start to feel more optimistic. I start to smile. The brain chemistry changes.
Yeah.
And so to people like us and other people with depression or mood disorders who are super sensitive to the information that comes in, you have to really make sure that you expose yourself to information that's uplifting, especially at the beginning of the day and before you go to bed.
I didn't know about that part. That was new information to me.
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes I wake up and I just plop. I get on Facebook. I've been awake for 20 seconds, and I'll hop on Facebook and start scrolling and reading. And sometimes there are things I read and I'm like, oh shit, like that's.
Yeah, I can't have I have something called something that helps me measure my sleep.
Yeah.
So I have the
like a Fitbit or whatever.
Well, it's called Sleepbot. It's an application I basically downloaded. So I have the iPhone by my bed, right?
Yeah.
So in the old days, I would get up, I'd be going, let me see what's going on, and I would immediately hit the New York Times.
Yeah, exactly.
And then 4 or 5 really bad things would come to me, and I said, oh my God. So I put the phone down. Now I don't do that anymore.
Smart.
I will not. I will wait maybe for an hour before when I'm fully awake and really centered before I will look at a newspaper.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take that to heart and implement it. And guys, I think this is one of those things where, I hear him say this and that's great, but information versus application of information is huge, and so I encourage you guys to take some of these suggestions like I plan on doing, because I was listening to myself. I was thinking of myself when you brought up that whole time space before bed and after bed to set better boundaries. And I don't think inherently we're telling you to ignore trauma in the world or things that are going on, or feel like you shouldn't know about it and look through the world in a rose-colored, through rose-colored glasses. But I think it's just about keeping an even perspective, not a right or left perspective on good and bad. It's just being willing to take in both, and then have a healthy time frame for consuming it and knowing when to consume it. And then setting boundaries for even what you're reading. You read something that's upsetting, don't keep reading. It's within your power to stop. And unless you think more good would come of it, there's no reason to do it. You have to protect yourself, because if you're not keeping your brain space clear, how valuable or useful will you be to those around you who might need you most? I mean, they need you clear, you need yourself clear. You just have to figure out your triggers and cues and implement some of the things Doug has brought up here. And it's one more thing that we can do to just keep even, which is huge. A small thing can send some of us off for days, weeks, months.
Well, this guy who I talked to on the East Coast today, been 5 months.
And that's terrible. I feel for him. It's really rough, and I've had very similar experiences. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Be on the lookout for a few more, because we're doing a mass shoot today. We're trying to knock out a few videos, and I hope you enjoyed that topic. Leave your comments in the description. Or excuse me. Feel free to leave comments, share things you've learned for setting boundaries and dealing with hard to deal with information in the world. Show Doug lots of love. Check out his channel. This guy is class. He's as good as it gets for mental health topics. On point, consistent, very brilliant.
Why don't you tell him how to get to it?
Yeah, there's a link in the description. You can click that.
Or just basically go to YouTube. And type in Douglas Bloch Depression.
Douglas Bloch Depression.
With an H. Bloch.
There you go. And then you can just click in the link in the description.
You'll get right to the channel.
Perfect. And so we'll see you guys in the next video. Hang in there. Whatever you're going through, you can get through it 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time. And thank you for being on the channel, sir.
Excellent. Yes, very much.
All right, guys.
This has been Douglas Bloch. Thank you for watching this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to leave me your feedback, you can do so in the comments section, or you can email me, douglasbloch@gmail.com. If you want to learn more about this work, during the closing credits, if you click on my photo in the upper left-hand corner of the page, you'll be taken to my channel where you can subscribe. If you click on the book Below that, you'll be taken to my website, healingfromdepression.com, and if you click on one of the videos, you'll get to see that video. And until we meet again, I wish you the best in your mental health recovery. Thank you.